On the surface, the town of Millbrook looked like the kind of place where nothing unusual ever happened. It was small, quiet, and tucked between rolling hills and dense forests in the northeastern United States. The streets were lined with modest houses, family-owned shops, and the same cafes that had been serving coffee to the same customers for decades. In Millbrook, people knew each other. Neighbors waved from their porches, children rode their bikes along the sidewalks after school, and if something out of the ordinary happened, word traveled quickly through the town. But on an ordinary autumn afternoon, something happened that no one could explain. And in the years that followed, the disappearance of one woman would quietly reshape the entire community. Her name was Claire Donovan. Claire was 38 years old. She worked as a librarian at the small Millbrook Public Library, a brick building that sat just across the street from the town square. Most people described her the same way: quiet, thoughtful, kind. She lived alone in a small two-story house just outside the center of town. It wasn't far from the library, just a short 10-minute drive down a winding road surrounded by trees. Her life was simple. She worked during the day. In the evenings, she often read, tended to her small garden, or walked through the nearby park. Nothing about Claire's life suggested mystery, until the day she disappeared. It was a Thursday in early October. The weather was cool but clear, the kind of afternoon when the sun filtered through the changing leaves and painted the streets in shades of gold and orange. Claire left the library at exactly 4:17 p.m. Security cameras from the parking lot showed her locking the door behind her, adjusting her shoulder bag, and walking calmly toward her car. She waved to a colleague across the street. Then she drove away. For most people in Millbrook, that moment passed without a second thought, but no one in the town would ever see Claire Donovan again. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Claire's car was seen driving through the center of town shortly after she left the library. A camera near a small grocery store captured her vehicle passing through an intersection at 4:24 p.m. She was heading in the direction of her home. But somewhere along that quiet road between town and the wooded outskirts of Millbrook, something happened. Claire never arrived home. When she didn't show up for work the next morning, her coworkers assumed she might be sick. But by the afternoon, concern began to grow. Claire was not the type of person who simply disappeared. She answered messages, she kept her schedule, and she had never missed work without notice. By the evening, her sister, who lived 2 hours away, called the Millbrook Police Department and asked for a welfare check. When officers arrived at Claire's house later that night, they noticed something strange immediately. The house was locked, the lights were off, and Claire's car was not in the driveway. At first glance, it seemed like she simply hadn't come home yet. But as investigators would soon discover, the situation was far more unsettling than anyone in town expected.
The following morning, the search began. Millbrook was not used to dealing with missing person cases, especially not ones involving someone as well known as Claire Donovan. Within hours, local officers began retracing her route from the library to her home. It wasn't a long drive. In fact, it usually took less than 10 minutes. But when police reached the stretch of road where the town slowly faded into thick forest, they discovered something unexpected. Claire's car was parked on the shoulder of the road. The vehicle wasn't damaged. It wasn't hidden. It was simply sitting there, as if someone had pulled over for a moment and planned to return shortly. The driver's door was closed. The keys were gone. But everything else remained exactly where it should have been. Claire's bag was still on the passenger seat. Inside it were her wallet, her phone charger, and a small notebook she used at work. Her phone, however, was missing. Investigators searched the surrounding area immediately. The road was quiet, bordered by dense woods that stretched for miles in either direction. There were no nearby houses, no businesses, and very little traffic after sunset. Search teams combed through the forest. Volunteers joined the effort. Drones were sent overhead to scan the terrain. But after hours of searching, there was no sign of Claire.
No footprints. No discarded belongings.
No evidence of a struggle. Just a quiet road and an abandoned car. Over the next few days, investigators began looking deeper into Claire's life. They checked bank records, phone activity, emails. But nothing unusual appeared. Her bank account remained untouched after the day she disappeared. Her phone had last connected to a cell tower near the same road where her car was found. And then the signal went silent. The case quickly spread beyond the town. State investigators joined the search. Local news stations reported on the disappearance. And for the first time in decades, Millbrook found itself at the center of a mystery. People began locking their doors earlier. Parents grew cautious about letting children walk home alone. Even though there was no clear sign of danger, the feeling that something unexplained had happened settled quietly over the town. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And still, there were no answers. Eventually, the official search ended. But the mystery remained. As time passed, several theories began to circulate among investigators and residents of Millbrook. One theory suggested Claire may have encountered someone on the road that afternoon. Perhaps another driver had stopped, or someone walking along the shoulder had asked for help. But there were no witnesses. No vehicles reported in the area. And no evidence suggesting another person had been there. Another possibility was that Claire left voluntarily. Some investigators quietly wondered whether she had chosen to disappear. But the facts didn't support that idea. Her wallet remained in the car. Her bank account showed no unusual withdrawals. And she had made plans with friends for the weekend. There was also the question of her phone. It was the only item missing from the car. Yet despite extensive searches, the device was never recovered. The final theory was the simplest, and perhaps the most unsettling. That something unexpected had happened. Something quick. Something random. A moment that lasted only seconds, but changed everything. The road where Claire's car was found remained quiet in the years that followed. Drivers still passed through it every day. But for many residents of Millbrook, the place carried a different meaning now. A reminder of the day their town changed. Even today, more than a decade later, Claire Donovan's disappearance remains unsolved. Her case is still technically open. Her photo still appears occasionally on missing person bulletins. And in Millbrook, people still talk about that autumn afternoon. Not in dramatic whispers, but in quiet conversations. Because in a small town where everyone once believed they understood every street and every face, Claire's disappearance introduced something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The kind of mystery that doesn't fade easily. And every now and then, when someone drives along that quiet forest road just outside town, they slow down slightly as they pass the spot where Claire's car was found. Not because they expect to discover something, but because they remember. The disappearance that changed an entire small town. And the question that still remains unanswered. What really happened to Claire Donovan?